The problem with having idols is that they're never what we want, even if they are what we think. And in that sense, I'd like to apologize to a lot of you. I know people want me walking the noble path, to take this curse I've been given and forge it into a sword of righteous wrath, to defend the weak and push back the darkness. And if the dice fell a different way in my life, maybe I would. But as it stands, I'm not in a place where ideals are a benefit. No, the path that I'm walking down is dark, broken, dangerous, and full of uncomfortable twists and turns. If I'm not willing to follow where it leads, I'm dead, and likely much worse. So for all of you that want me to be a superhero by another name, stop listening. Pretend I lived my days stopping muggers in alleyways and making friends with folks on the fringes of society. Because what I did, what I'm willing to do, is nothing like that. When Demi said there was dark experimentation ahead of me, he, if anything, understated the fact. At first, the God Eater was hot on our heels. We'd skip from city to city trying to find the time and the materials to see what makes me tick. Ritual sacrifice here, double amputation there. You know, typical stuff. But it began to drag behind. Demi had theories, but we didn't bother looking a gift horse in the mouth. More time meant more chances to knock complicated experiments off the list. And what a list it was. It wasn't too long before I developed a reputation. If you knew how to look, of course. In Battle Creek, Michigan, they blamed the slangs on a serial killer in the newspapers and dogmen on deep web forums. In Columbus, Ohio, teenagers began to speak of the ghost of a homeless woman who left no traces besides strange symbols left in old blood. 4 farmers abandoned their fields near Windsor, Ontario. They didn't make a fuss, took the loss in stride. But when halfway through a case of beer, every one would be perfectly willing to tell you of the times they saw a lone scarecrow walking their fields, talking to things that they couldn't see. No idea where these people got their descriptions from, by the way. Guess the human mind fills in the blanks when scared shitless and facing likely death. What do I look like now? Whatever I please. One of the many little tools I've picked up on my journey to damn myself. But when I look in a mirror, what I see is a horror of bone and muscle, eyes suspended in hollow sockets, floating of their own accord. Entire pieces of my arms and legs are missing, black, tarry sinews connecting them. I keep myself in layers of clothing, protecting the world from my constant toxic weep. What the hell is that? I asked Demi. We stand on the second floor of an abandoned jail, a place that lately I've come to call my home. Demi has a long and involved explanation as to why he wants us haunting this pit of asbestos and vermin. But like most things involving him, I take it on faith in one hand and prepare for betrayal in the other.
This?
Demi says. The object he is holding is 2 orbs, fused in the middle. One pitch black, one spotless white. Even in the dust and grime of the prison.
This is the reason I decided to lend a hand on your little sojourn, instead of grabbing some popcorn and watching from the sidelines.
I've learned it's better not to take the bait with Demi. I let silence impregnate the room. Eventually, he continues.
One side are the lives you have saved, the other are the lives you have taken. The first number never increases unless it was selfish and you had something to lose. The second, not unless the life you took was not yours to take.
He spins the trinket through his fingers as he speaks. According to who? I ask. Demi shrugs.
That is the question now, isn't it? I've seen monsters, legends, demigods, and things that play at being divine, but I've never given much thought to what would be beyond that. But this unassuming little bauble is more powerful than anything I've owned. Its magic comes from a well so deep even I haven't been curious enough to explore it. Maybe it was made by some magi or entity that was lost to time. If not, though, well, maybe it would be good to try and even out those numbers a little bit before someone else takes a bigger rock to my skull.
He chuckles a bit, as if he's trying to convince himself with this monologue just as much as he's trying to convince me. Demi, you have a conscience? I laugh, the hollow noise echoing through the jail.
After a fashion. My sins are in great enough quantity that stopping something that would destroy the world, given the chance, may be the only way to balance them out. If I'd not came across what may be the world's most unlucky woman, I'd have likely just continued my own path and dealt with the consequences when the time came.
His tone is matter-of-fact. I start to judge, but remember how the last year of my life has been spent. I hear the sound of the door being forced open. But beyond that, I feel the people enter the jail. The longer we stay, the more of a connection to this place I feel. 5 people coming in to film some shit, I say, exasperated. Make no mistake, I don't take joy in hurting people. What I do for revenge. Or, if I'm being charitable to myself, to stop something from devouring this world and the next. Demi pulls out a large book bound with pulsating human skin. He begins to flip through the seemingly infinite pages, looking for ways to make the most out of the unfortunate group who wandered into our domain. Is there anything PG-13 in there, Demi? I'm not mentally up for any dirty work tonight. That construction crew in Jolet, I swear I've been seeing them in the shadows. I ask. Demi rolls his eyes.
The unlucky woman defies her nickname. Have we not seen what happens if you overwhelm someone's senses with fear?
He says, one long, ragged nail holding down a crumbling yellow page. As much as this seems like the perfect response to my request, there is a good reason I haven't knocked this item off of the shit list. Scaring someone into a faint is surprisingly hard. Make someone run is easy. Overwhelm someone's senses so hard with fear and torture that they stroke out and die, also easy. But that middle ground, where the mind shuts itself down without committing neural harikiri, that's threading a needle. Casualties are better than victims, I guess, I say, stretching out, which is unnecessary. Whatever keeps my limbs moving sure as hell isn't flesh and bone. But habits are hard to break. Demi moves to the shadows, watching the situation play out. My bare feet make no noise as I walk down the pitch-black halls and stairwells, black gel like ink leaving coal-colored footprints behind me. I'm seeing things in the cells. This always happens when I have to start tapping into the shit keeping me up and moving. I don't know if they're really there or not, and until they become a real issue, I don't plan on telling Demi. I can't turn into shadow like Demi, but I don't need to. I know every blind turn, every place the flickering light bulbs don't quite reach. I'm waiting for the group from a dozen feet away, and they are none the wiser. I barely see the rest. I'm finding the leader, the one I need to break. Every group has one. It's not always the biggest, the meanest, or the smartest. There's some intangible trait I'm looking for, or rather, smelling. I could do it silently. I chose not to. They look around, the crumbling building making the sound impossible to trace. I found him. He's around 20, Latino with a headlamp, and a look that tells me he already understands something is wrong. The man cracks a glow stick, tossing it in my direction, but well past me. The group walks by. My target is random, the last in line. A man of about 40, balding, and with a faded X-Files t-shirt. In a blur, I take the man, one hand around his mouth, the other around his waist. One of the few tangible benefits I've gotten recently is being able to not kill anyone I touch. With enough concentration, anyway. He sits on the floor of a cell. I'm kneeling, meeting his gaze, staring daggers into him. He looks me up and down, again and again, not able to believe what he's seeing. I put a finger up to my shredded lips. My command is understood, and the man stops struggling. We wait a few minutes till we hear a mumbled, frantic conversation from the far end of a cell block. "I want to hear you scream," I whisper, breaking the man's pinky finger with a rotten wood snap. The man is a goddamn tank, or too scared to understand a simple request. He curses, tears coming from his eyes, but no scream. I slap him, ragged nails leaving shallow cuts across his face. "I'm not being figurative. You scream well, I stop having to make you scream." He finally clues in and begins to wail. I grab the finger and twist it for good measure. His pitch raises to voice-cracking levels. I'm out of the cell long before the rest of the group arrives. As expected, the wounded man is confused, rambling. As always, they make a break for the door. As required, Demi has long since made sure the door isn't going to budge. The pistol cocks. I start to walk slowly, loudly, toward the group. They don't scatter. They hold their ground, watching me walk toward them, arms outstretched. A dozen flashes of light, a dozen bullets pass harmingly through me, blowing chunks out of the concrete behind my shrunken, leathery form. I can feel the fear relaxing myself. I feel the tendrils of cursed ink spring forth from the missing pieces of my body, fanning like peacock feathers, preparing to strike like scorpion tails. I let a phlegmatic, rattling noise escape me. It echoes and multiplies, distorting itself, becoming louder and softer. It's a sentient noise. Not much it can actually do to hurt anyone, but it doesn't need to. The cacophony and the monster in front of them is visibly wearing them down. The leader sees this and picks up a piece of rebar from the ground. Reminds me a little of myself once upon a time. He charges towards me. I expect nothing else. Just as he swings with the pipe, two of the tendrils yank me up into the ceiling in a black blur, but not before taking a little something. I drop the man's ear among the group as I drag myself through the cracks back to the second floor, leaving them to drink in their situation.
That's your definition of PG-13, is it?
Jimmy taunts me.
Not that I disapprove, but the ear may have been a bit much.
That guy's not breaking without losing a few pieces. He'll thank me when he has PTSD instead of a tombstone. Demi and I discuss how to proceed. Demi may make my crimes look like shoplifting, but I don't have a very creative mind in regards to this kind of stuff. I take no enjoyment in the fear or the blood. They are tools, not toys. But Demi has an honest love for screwing with people, bordering on the obsessive. Comes in handy, to say the least. "If you think that'll do the job, I'll give it a try, but honestly, if worse comes to worse..." I began, but I'm cut off by a gunshot. Not the tiny pop from the pawnshop pistol from before, but a thundering explosion followed by a quarter-sized hole in my chest that is ringed by burning gray embers. The wound burns. I haven't felt pain in months, not since I stood ankle-deep in the blood of 13 thieves. But I scream. A too real, too human noise to be coming from my dime store comic form. I grab the wound, turning around to see the strangest thing. A man, late 30s, but scarred, torn up to look well beyond his years. He's about 5'9", missing an eye, the flesh around it pale and lifeless. In one hand, he has an old steel cane. I can practically feel the power radiating from it. And the other, he holds a large pistol covered in script and runes I recognize. He wears a thick leather jacket, obviously designed for function instead of style. The chains and buckles making it look more like medieval armor than modern fashion. The guy didn't exactly cut an intimidating figure, but the animal laying beside him, half asleep, confused me further. It was some kind of basset hound, an ancient, giant, crippled thing, all gray fur and loose, flopping skin. So much so, I wondered how in the hell the saggy, yellow-eyed canine got around without tripping over itself. I got the feeling this guy was here with ill intent, but the two of them looked much more Hanna-Barbera than Sam Raimi. I don't feel shaken, despite the burning pain in my chest. "Who the hell are you?" I say, stepping forward aggressively. As if he didn't come in packing a handful of disabilities and a dying dog, the man smiles before replying. I'm the guy who was told to find you and pass on a message. But the way I see it, if that bitch wants something from you, my best move is to put you 6 feet under. Demi puts a hand on my shoulder, stopping me from getting closer.
And what of the tube-shaped monstrosity you brought?
Demi says, never one to pass up a good speech. Johnny here. Oh, I got him by cashing in every favor I've accumulated in my sad little life. Figured if you were Lisa's friend, wasn't a point in taking chances. Heard of Cerberus? Well, I don't know if I believe all that religious shit attached, but I've met plenty of monster dogs. Things with the soul of a man's best friend, but born in the depths of the void. Johnny here, he's the exact opposite of that. One of the last 6 left on Earth, actually. The man holsters his gun. I see him pull something out of his jacket.
And you expect that to even the odds with him, do you?
Demi goads the man. No, I'm not the man I once was. The man shows what he's holding. It looks similar to a flashbang grenade, but I've found ways to relive the past. Name's Vic, by the way. The man lobs the grenade underhand, slowly. It ignites as it spins through the air, spraying sparkling white fog in a massive plume. The dog starts to stand, agonizingly slowly. As it does, it starts to get longer, wider, taller. His eyes lose that dead sheen and turn a vibrant blue, the intellect behind them obvious and ancient. It fills out every inch of the folds of its skin, going from an 80-kilo morbidly obese dog on the verge of death to a massive horse-sized creature that wolves could only wish to be. I start to feel lightheaded and turn to Demi. What I see is a man in his mid-50s wearing Demi's clothing. Not the pale, unstoppable corpse I've come to know, but a regular, fragile-looking human.
We need to run, now.
Demi says. We bolt down a hallway. My skin burns, my head aches. I see globs of ink slowing off of me, flaking to nothing before they hit the ground. The fog rolls in like it has a mind of its own. We keep steps ahead of it, Demi already starting to pant and tire. What's going on? I say, dragging Demi into an old security office. I peel layers of clothing off, stuffing them in the doorframe, hoping to block the burning, disorienting mist. Demi sits in a mold-ridden old chair, unable to speak. After long, agonizing seconds, he tells me what he knows.
The little bastard knows his trinkets.
Demi says with a cough.
That fog takes things that used to be human and brings them back to that state for a time.
Demi wipes blood from the corners of his mouth. He doesn't need to tell me how dire the situation is. Sure, letting this withered old psychopath bleed out would likely be a net benefit for the world. But without him, his book, and his seemingly endless supply of cursed object, I'd have to navigate the world of creatures, pacts, and dark rituals myself.
But so do I.
Demi says, fiddling with a vial inside his jacket. He draws a long, thin knife, places the tip of his pinky on the rusted steel blade, and slices it off. He applies a black powder to the spurting stump, with a sizzling noise and a smell that I honestly can't describe. The wound seals. He pours the vial over the piece of flesh and bone. It begins to rot, then spread a thick, black and green mold over the table.
We need to throw them off their game. You go after the film crew. See if you can get him away from his beast. His type can't resist the urge to play hero. I'll keep them busy as long as I can. I terrorized London with nothing more than my hands and my wits. I'm more than capable of haranguing a boy and his dog with the same.
Demi stands, adjusting some of his trinkets.
I'll get things started.
Somehow, that grin of his looks worse on a human face. The mold is covering the walls and the ceiling now, pulsating, sprouting sick, diseased-looking fronds and mushrooms. When Demi opens the door, tendrils seem to race each other to cover every inch of the prison in foul, grasping vegetation. He stands in the hallway, walking casually through the fog, inspecting the alien plants as if he was in a conservatory instead of a fight for his life. I creep through the hallways, listening for any sign of this demon slayer, or his beast. I can feel the film crew heading upstairs. I don't feel the cane until it hits my stomach. It wasn't swung fast. It wasn't a heavy object. but I flew into the wall by the stairwell like I was hit by a truck. I struggle to get to my feet, the fog and the blow making the world swim and wobble. You hear the term monster hunter and you picture an underdog, some regular Joe who got on the bad side of something like myself and decided to pick up a chainsaw and fight back. You picture that because you're not a monster. What stalks toward me sets off a fear so deep within me. To call it primal would be to affront whatever set the universe in motion. I feel scared. I feel hunted. I'm staring at something that's whole reason to have been born is to kill me. So, what is it you have of her, Alex? You store the baby hearts or kitten souls? Emergency supply of virgin blood? Has to be pretty goddamned important if she has you and Charlie Chaplin back there guarding it. I know he doesn't tend to come cheap. Victor punctuates his sentence by lightly tapping me with the cane. My right arm bursts into pain. I hit the ground. Off in the distance, I hear the sounds of growling and metal tearing. Fuck me, do you have it wrong, Vic? What does she have me guarding? She turned me into a walking corpse. She made me carry a plague, then set me loose on everyone close to me, fucked up as they were. I'd let you take my head from my shoulders here and now. I don't want this. But if I did that, I wouldn't get the satisfaction of crushing her bird neck under my heel. All of you know how much I hate speeches, but I needed to buy myself a little bit of time. This guy seems to have a good heart, but I'm not willing to trust him. There's too much at stake. As the film crew rounds the corner, I sprint past Vic, catching him off guard. I narrowly avoid the cane, which sparks as it clings off the wall. I know I don't have much time. My arm shakes and trembles as I lift one of the film crew by their neck, holding them between myself and Victor. If we can just calm the hell down, I think we can have... The body tears open in the middle. A torrent of blood and gore as the man's legs hit the ground. At first, I assumed Victor was just callous, shooting through the man. But as I drop the rest of the body, I see the shocked, venomous look on his face. He draws and raises his pistol in an instant, firing as he advances. I turn and run, hoping Demi is having a better time than myself. The film crew scatter. A bullet zips through my stomach. I find myself coughing, the fluid coming up. Not the gray ichor or black ink I've become used to, but a thin, red blood. Demi is backing away from the dog thing, the canine creature's body taking up the entire walkway on the second tier of cells. Vines and gnashing maws grab the thing, but it tears through them like light scrub. Demi pulls something from his coat. It glows with a black light. The dog knocks it out of his hand with one massive paw, almost sending Demi over the edge of the railing in the process. I run to Demi, so much slower now. I see raw red patches of skin and bone replacing the missing pieces of myself. They burn and itch, but I put it out of my mind. I grab the old man by the collar and throw him, ass over tea kettle, into one of the cells. Two jaws snap shut just in front of me, close enough to drench me in the beast's drool. I toss myself into the cell, slamming the rusted gate shut with flagging strength. Likely the thing would be able to rip the bars out of the wall with ease, but it has no leverage. The bars bend and warp as it tries to break through, but they hold for the moment. I slump against the wall, trying to catch my breath. Something I thought would never be an issue again. I see Demi, and even discounting the battle scars. He's looking bad. Dark circles around his eyes, blood dripping from a corner in his mouth, and a hacking cough that stops his rummaging through his coat more than once. Why are you taking this worse than I am, Demi? I ask.
When I stopped relying on this body, it was in a fragile state. You are returning to your prime. I am returning to my deathbed.
Demi replies as a piece of metal tears free from the bars, embedding itself in the cement behind us. Demi fishes out a vial of clear liquid, tossing it at a wall between cells. It creates a human-sized hole. We both manage to crawl through just as the beast behind us tears the bars from the cell, filling the room with teeth and fury. The wall behind us buckles as the dog throws itself against it. How many of those do you have? I scream, trying to find a way out of one of the locked cells.
They don't come in a six-pack, Alex. That was my only one.
Demi laughs, taking off his jacket, scanning his remaining treasures. I rattle the bars, but realize my arms are motivated by nothing more than flesh and bone again. I rattle loose a bit of dust, but nothing more.
Aha!
Demi says, walking over to the wall, holding a clear crystal jar full of what looks like mud. Bricks crack and fall. We see more of the beast that is seconds away from ending us. Demi dabs a thick line of brown mud on the crumbling wall. The wall is so destroyed we could probably push it over ourselves. But the dog stands still, halting its destruction, a deep rage in its eyes. Demi quickly spreads the concoction over the other walls and bars, laughing like a madman. "What is that crap?" I asked, confused as about the nature of our salvation.
A little bit of everything. Holy water from Rome, soil from Mecca, scrapings from the Wailing Wall, sacred tobacco, and plenty of other herbs and spices. See, that thing can tear through the power of the void, but what I just did is consecrate our little cell. I'm betting it can't or won't desecrate it to get in."
Demi says this proudly, displaying that wicked smile of his. We take a moment, me catching my breath, Demi coughing up blood and semi-solids. The hunter walks up slowly, his cane ringing, even through overgrown vegetation, burning patches of it wherever it touches the ground. "What about me, though?" Victor says, walking in front of the cell. In one hand, he holds a jerry can, I assume full of something flammable. I've seen this before. Dowsing. It's how people are handled when they represent a real danger in prison. Marines, professional fighters, anyone who could still take a few people out if you sent your people in with their best gear. The difference between a prison cell and a brick oven is fire. Once one gets started, it doesn't stop until the cell is scoured clean. I've got no problem pissing all over your holy goo. And I'm sure Johnny will forgive me. He twists the spout of the can off, splashing it in the cell. I try and go in a corner or under a bed, but there isn't a point. "You, come over here and get a life lesson," Victor says to the remaining film crew. They come over, shuffling, seemingly as terrified of him as us. "If you ever find yourself in a situation like this, don't trap them and run. Don't put a steel pipe through their head and assume you've killed them. You don't stop destroying these things till there is nothing left but ash." Victor empties the can. I'm sure Demi would be panicking, but he can't seem to breathe in, the fumes sending him into a gore-soaked coughing fit. Victor brings out a Zippo, striking it. He smiles, looks like he's about to say something heroic. Then it starts. A torrent of wind sweeps through the jail. A hurricane-force wind that rips the lighter from Victor's hand. Both him and the film crew struggle to remain on their feet, kneeling and grabbing cell bars or stair rails to avoid being tossed from the walkway. The fog is dispersed in an instant. The fungal, spreading mold torn from the surfaces of the prison, torn from its moorings and sent spinning, tumbleweed into the deep shadows. Demi takes a deep breath, his skin turning waxy, fingers turning into gnarled claws. Dark tendrils extend from the shadows, dressing him in his coat. Flesh and bone is rejected from me, with enough force to shred it against the cell walls. I feel strong, for a moment, ready for round 2. As usual, Demi shits all over that.
Now would likely be a good time to mention that consecrating the walls is going to make it a bit difficult for us to get out,
he says. The wind dies down. The people outside our cell are shaken, trying to get their bearings. We hear footsteps, then clapping, then a familiar voice, but impossibly loud. "Oh, Victor! You had one job. Find the girl, pass on the message. But you couldn't even do that. Had to be the hero, had to go in half-cocked and pissed off." Lisa. I could see her through the cracks in the masonry. Slight, but with a confidence that seems about right for something that can summon a tornado in a building. The dog hunches in the cell, knowing pure evil. It springs at the tiny woman. Without so much as a wave of her hand, she redirects the creature's momentum. It turns into a blur as it speeds through the air, slamming into the walkway on the other side of the cell block. It hangs there, screaming and howling, metal spars skewering it, holding it, almost crucified in the open air. "So, I guess I was smart to keep an eye on you. For the record, Vic, I would have let you go. I just knew you wouldn't be smart enough to follow simple instructions, Lisa finishes, standing in front of the cell. She looks to Demi and myself, dressed in a perfectly fitted suit. In dark gray and black, she cuts a classic figure of the devil. Before she gets a chance to speak, a haunting melody begins to play. She gets a dazed look on her face, and I look to see Victor playing an old, cracked flute. His face is full of righteous indignation at odds with his awkward playing of the instrument. But whatever it is, it seems to hold Lisa in place. He stops playing, tapping her head with the flute. I knew you were watching, but I also banked on you having enough on your plate you couldn't do it 24 hours a day. I've been sitting on this little fella for a long time. I'm guessing you've seen it before? He puts a round through Lisa's leg. Besides the smoking hole, she shows no reaction. Say goodbye to your boss, Victor says, aiming the pistol at Lisa's head. I can't tell you what happened, but when it was over, Lisa was holding Victor over her head, one-handed by his thigh. He kicks and thrashes, but has no angle of attack. She plucks the cane from his grasp, tossing it away. He fires the gun till it's dry, but each round passes harmlessly through her. Child of Hamlin, you really bought that? I had more faith in you than that, Victor. Anyone who knows what I was or am is long dead. I've spread a web of lies and misinformation for longer than your family name has existed. Lisa shakes her head and chuckles as she says this, walking over to the railing, still effortlessly holding Victor. She threads his leg through two of the bars, leaning his weight just a bit to one side. She lets go, turning to speak to us. The hunter struggles to stay straight while avoiding falling over the edge. He doesn't last long, falling toward the walkway, shattering and twisting his knee, leaving him nearly tied to the railing by his own leg. His scream is mercifully short, pain and trauma taking him from consciousness. Now, Alex, you and I need to have a talk, Lisa says, unbuttoning her shirt, revealing that sigil of gold and silver, the copied rune that has caused so much shit in my life. It cracks open, and what comes out is a sad, stunted little thing. Nothing more than half a lung and some blunted insectile legs. You and I have an exchange to make. You get this stunted little runt, a god-eater, but one that will never have the guile or force to use you as a puppet. One more, your speed. I get the paragon I saddled you with. Lisa's tone is almost lecturing. Hate to break this to you, but I severed that connection long ago. Your guess is as good as mine where that thing is. I spit, walking to the bars, feeling the burn from the consecrated steel, even from half a foot away. Not in any of the ways that matter. Say the word, shed your burden. I make the mistake of staring into Lisa's eyes as she speaks. I struggle to keep the words from forming.
Alex, I hate to say this, but I was holding out on you,
Demi says. This is followed by a small tink of shattered glass. In an instant, the floor beneath Lisa is gone, taking the sliding door of the cell with it. Demi is past me, bounding like the midnight horror he truly is. I clear the hole and just about reach the stunned film crew when I hear Victor. Help, he says weakly, adding, I can get you out of here. I don't know why I chose to trust him. Lack of options, likely, but I untwisted his mangled leg, put him under one arm, and sprinted to catch up with Demi. The film crew scatters. I tell them to follow us, but there really isn't any point. They're pawns at worst and collateral damage at best. We make it out of the cell blocks, taking a moment in the staff room to regroup. We hear the noises of Lisa taking out her frustration on the film crew behind us. We know we don't have much time. Would I be right in assuming someone in this room was at some point a surgeon with a couple 100 years of experience? Victor says, seemingly at random. Demi looks at him, curious.
Go on.
There's an object about the size and shape of a silver dollar somewhere in the middle of my brain. Something a lot like yourself put it there as punishment for my brother not fulfilling his end of a deal. It takes something away from me. Something that could help you guys get out of here. But it's in deep enough, I'm not surviving getting it taken out. If you can save enough gray matter to keep me breathing for a bit, I can get you 2, maybe 4 minutes with that thing stripped of everything that makes her scary, Victor says. Then we go in there and tear her apart? I say, completing the thought. No. Too many variables. If I can't keep it up, or die in 20 seconds, you both die on the spot. Whatever she is, it's beyond any of us. Victor explains. You scare her. Convince her to live to fight another day. She's a bully. She won't stand her ground without an advantage. Demi pulls out an ancient leather surgeon's bag. Impossibly sharp scalpels, bone saws, and picks catch the minimal light in the staff room. There is no sterilization, no anesthetic, just a brave man and a monster that seems enthralled at getting to sift through a living brain. The sounds of murder get closer and eventually stop. Only slightly after Demi uses a long silver set of forceps to take out a round, black disc from deep inside Victor's head. The hunter is babbling, rambling, but as the cursed coin is removed, both Demi and myself can feel the pure power radiating from the man. Lisa doesn't open the rusted metal door. The entire wall simply dissolves in front of us, erased. She stands, covered in blood and gore, dust and flecks of concrete. Her hatred is tangible. Everything behind her turns into a black hellscape. Her eyes glow light like lighthouses portending disaster. Victor slowly raises his head, blood pouring from the trepanned hole in his skull. He raises a shaking hand, almost accusatory toward Lisa. What comes from his mouth isn't heroic. It was incoherent and sad enough to make my heart sink. But the power behind it, it felt like an artillery shell landing. Walls around Lisa shattering, the hellscape being torn apart like stage curtains. The woman, in an instant, stripped of that demon spawn aura of hers. Unlike the grenade from earlier, Demi and myself were untouched. I don't bother with being subtle. No shadows creeping, no strange noises or smells. I rush the wisp of a woman. She raises her hands to defend herself, but I send her to the ground with a backhanded slap. I begin to contemplate just ending it, stomping on her face before Victor's last heroic act was over. But I learned from my mistakes. I don't know what contingencies or help Lisa has, but I do know being out of her reach will be a drastic improvement on my life. Give me a couple months, Lisa. Then we can settle this on even terms, without Demi or your little errand boy getting in the way. I lie. I don't want to just beat you, I want your job. But it's going to be a lot easier taking over your troops if I can do it holding your severed head. So how about you run before I decide to take my chances with a hostile takeover? I'm inches from her face, ink dripping from my mouth and eyes, sizzling and burning as it hits the floor. The fear in her eyes made everything worth it. If she managed to destroy me with some vile trick then and there, I would have died happy. Watching her scramble, scratched and bleeding, suit torn and image destroyed, was almost as satisfying.
Good bluff, Alex. And then again, you did learn from the best.
Demi says when we feel Lisa leave the building. He walks over to Victor, who is still barely clinging on to life. He tilts the man's head forward.
Seems I did a better job than intended. Alex, go find me some rubbing alcohol, bandages, and antibiotics. Looks like I get to be the hero now.